I'm Gregor Thomson, I'm a philosopher and a writer, and I know what the meaning of life is. Welcome to The Struggle. This episode is brought to you by The Struggle newsletter. This is a weekly email newsletter in which I send out for free every Sunday a short article concerning the art of embracing struggle. If you feel restricted in life, if something is holding you back, perhaps it's time to struggle your way towards freedom. If you're trying to be productive, you're trying to be healthy and to achieve your dreams, perhaps you're chasing the wrong thing. A lot of us believe that we should be aiming for happiness, but this is an unwise pursuit, as happiness comes and goes without any control from us. However, there is a way to be more fulfilled with life, and that is to embrace struggle, to exercise, to eat healthily, to have uncomfortable conversations, to take career risks, to discover who you are, and to be autonomous. That's the way to break free from whatever it is that's restricting you. And that's why I created a newsletter. Along with the article, I also provide tips, strategies, and recommendations such as movies, music, podcasts, and recipes to help along the way. To sign up for free, go to gregorthomson.com. The link will be in the show notes. Confirm your subscription and make sure you check your spam folder for your welcome newsletter and add me to your contacts to continue to receive it in your inbox every week for free. And that's it. You're on your way to struggling more and being more productive, healthy, and motivated. Now, let's get on with the struggle. This is episode 42 of The Struggle with me, Gregor Thomson, and this week I'm going to discuss the unintended consequences of mass drug administration. Now, I want to preface this episode by saying I do believe that prescription drugs have their place in society and should be used in a lot of cases. However, the manner in which we prescribe and use drugs in many Western countries is highly flawed and may even cause more damage than it fixes. Now, not only have we achieved vast strides forward technologically speaking, causing unintended issues of overabundance and comfort, but the same can be argued with regards to medicine. Although in many countries we're living longer lives, we now suffer from overconsumption rather than the malnutrition of the past. A Lancet study found that obesity is now a greater threat to global health than hunger. And we now have medicinal antidotes to the majority of our aches and pains. However, it seems that the intended good of these medical accomplishments have had unintended consequences. A significant proportion of drugs that alleviate some form of pain are pressing on the pleasure side of the balance, meaning that they have addictive potential. Now, any long-term listeners of The Struggle will remember the pleasure-pain balance, but for new listeners, here's a quick summary. In her groundbreaking book, Dopamine Nation, Dr. Anna Lembke discusses the manner in which dopamine behaves in the brain. She simplifies it by imagining a balance in our heads. On one side is pain, and on the other side is pleasure. When we partake in a pleasurable activity or ingest a pleasurable substance, the balance tips towards pleasure. Although it doesn't stay there for long, because the balance yearns to remain balanced. However, the balance isn't perfect, and so instead of tipping back to balance and equilibrium, it reacts an equal and opposite amount and tips towards pain. The more pleasurable the activity or substance, the more pain will be felt afterwards. This cycle explains addiction, as you begin compulsively behaving or ingesting to soothe the pain felt following the behavior or ingestion, rather than partaking in the activity or ingesting the substance to feel the pleasure. You are partaking in the activity or ingesting the substance to avoid the pain. The more pleasurable the activity or substance, the more addictive it is, and thus the alleviation of one form of pain causes another. Now, many people in the US began using highly potent painkillers to alleviate pain following an injury. Then they became addicted, and when the prescription painkillers stopped coming, turned to illicit drugs. Hence why the overdose numbers in America are so horrific. Now, as well as physical painkillers, it seems that drugs that are taken to alleviate mental health disorders do not actually alleviate the symptoms of these disorders on a societal level, as Dr. Lembke argues. Quote, despite substantial increases in funding in 4 highly resourced countries in Australia, Canada, England and the US for psychiatric medications like antidepressants, anxiolytics, and hypnotics, the prevalence of mood and anxiety symptoms in these countries has not decreased between 1990 and 2015. Now, there are varying factors that could contribute to this, but these results still stand firm even when controlling for increases in risk factors for mental health disorders such as poverty and trauma, and even when studying severe mental illness such as schizophrenia. Therefore, these drugs intended to alleviate symptoms of mental illnesses are not doing their job correctly, or worse still, the overprescription of such drugs may actively be making some people's situations worse. There is increasing evidence showing that patients with anxiety and insomnia who take prescribed drugs like Xanax and Klonopin for these symptoms daily for over a month may experience worsened symptoms. Patients with pain who take opioids daily for over a month increase their risk for opioid addiction as well as increased pain. And quote, compelling new evidence indicates that ADHD drug treatment is associated with deterioration in academic and social emotional function. And more recently, data is portraying that antidepressant administration may lead to tolerance and dependence and potentially could make depression worse in the long run. All of this evidence is a fundamental metaphor for the significance of sacrifice, struggle, and pleasure, because when we tip the balance towards pleasure, when we alleviate all forms of struggle, when we relentlessly avoid pain, when we prioritize pleasure in the present regardless of the consequences, we cause ourselves more needless pain later. And these drugs, although beneficial to a significant proportion of the population, could cause more pain later for many people due to the elimination of pain now. And Dr. Lembke in her book Dopamine Nation outlines the effects of psychiatric medications on her patients. Whilst they do seem to alleviate pain short term, they also blunt a patient's ability to experience powerful emotions such as grief and awe. Whilst this may be beneficial for a patient suffering from mental illness, in the long run this hinders them rather than heals. Humans must feel and experience every emotion that forms the human experience, otherwise the alleviation of such painful emotions leads to a constant pressing on the pleasure side of the balance, leading to unnecessary pain long term and a numbing of all emotions. And this numb and painful existence seems to be the symptom of too much pleasure. And this can be seen with all forms of dopaminergic activities and drugs which are becoming more and more common in society. We have been slowly erasing all forms of pain and effort over hundreds of years, and we're seeing the effects of this now. You can even see this in the cars we drive. I recently took my 10-year-old car in for its MOT and service and was given the brand new version of my car for the day. And it's incredible how much effort we have erased from driving. I didn't have to change gear or even I didn't have to put the handbrake on because it did it automatically. The car could follow the car in front of me and follow the speed of it and even stay between the lines of the road without any input from the driver. Now, this may seem like an unimportant example, and don't get me wrong, I love the car, but the unintended consequences of erasing all effort and pain from our lives is that the balance on a societal scale tips too far to pleasure, causing more mental illness, pain, and the blunting of emotions pivotal to a healthy human experience. We are medicating ourselves in some form or another in order to numb ourselves to the pains of that human existence. Now, you may not think that you're addicted, but at the very least, you're likely to have some form of compulsion that numbs you. You turn to something when you feel pain. Maybe you distract yourself with social media, or maybe you blunt the emotion with alcohol or food. In this technological age, it's almost impossible not to be affected by the constant barrage of digital distractions. If it's not pornography, it's social media. If it's not social media, it's binge watching. If it's not heroin, it's food. If it's not food, it's sex. Becoming aware of our tendencies towards compulsive pleasure is the first step towards sacrificing those pleasures once in a while, so that we can experience the full breadth of human experience. When we numb ourselves with dopaminergic activities or drugs, we narrow our experience and present ourselves with pain later. In order to thrive, humans must experience all forms of existence, and unfortunately that must include pain, grief, anxiety, restlessness, and uncertainty. We must stop categorizing emotions into good and bad emotions. All emotions are informative, but only if we allow them in. Boredom isn't something we should be extinguishing. Perhaps it's there to show that what you're doing in that moment, or what you're doing as a career, isn't right for you. Or maybe it's telling you just to stop, take a rest and do nothing. Be bored. Maybe your mind is craving that. But you'll never know that if you continually distract yourself from boredom. These aspects of existence are also the reason that we question existence itself and philosophize life. The experiences of discomfort, pain, uncertainty, and anxiety are the reason why we have been able to contemplate existence and produce new forms of being that are fulfilling and meaningful. Therefore, we need the pain just as much as the pleasure. The key is to walk that extremely thin line between the two. If you tip too far towards pain, mental illness creeps in. If you tip too far towards pleasure, addictions are formed. Accepting pain and pleasure when they come is part of a healthy human experience. Tipping the balance intentionally towards pain in productive ways produces healthy and meaningful pleasure later. Sacrificing now for the future is one of the best ways to keep your balance. Now, I'm not saying don't watch television, don't scroll through social media. I'm certainly not saying don't take painkillers. Just that you become aware of why you're doing what you're doing. Are you doing so to distract yourself from painful emotions? Maybe you start tracking your emotions every time you pick up your phone, every time you scroll through social media. Become aware of the emotion that triggers you to distract yourself. I'm just saying, feel every emotion. Don't categorize emotions as good or bad. Feel the whole breadth of human experience, because all these emotions are there for a reason. Let them inform you rather than distract yourself from them. The answer lies in the struggle. So keep on struggling. Just a few more things before you take off. Firstly, thank you for watching. It genuinely means a lot to see people viewing and liking the content. Second, if you're enjoying the content, please subscribe and share. Those are the best ways you can support the podcast. As you can probably tell, I don't have a ton of fancy equipment. I don't have a team behind me helping with marketing or editing the podcast. I don't have much resources. So any help is greatly appreciated. You can also stay up to date with everything I'm doing on social media. All of the links will be in the show notes. And you can also listen to the Struggle podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. And lastly, keep on struggling.